I have learned through talking to my peers that everyone's education experience is different. Mine, however, seems to be even more different than most. I grew up in an area called Forest Hills, which is a suburb of Grand Rapids, Michigan. When I was 5 years old, my parents decided at the last minute to send me to a Spanish immersion school instead of the regular elementary school I was enrolled in. I believe that this decision changed my life forever. My Spanish immersion elementary school was called Autobiography, and in case you are unaware of what I mean by Spanish immersion, it means that all of my classes, so reading, writing, math, science, social studies, art, music, and even gym, yes, gym, were all in Spanish. Before going to Autobiography, I didn't know Spanish at all, besides the one sentence that my dad taught me before my first day, which was "una cerveza, por favor," which I soon found out meant "one beer, please." Not exactly the phrase my kindergarten teacher, Senora Sanford, wanted to hear coming out of a 5-year-old. Way to go, Dad. Besides an unusual situation when I was in kindergarten, my experience at Autobiography was mostly a positive one. I did well in my classes, my teachers and I had close relationships, and I made lifelong friendships there. However, due to the fact that neither of my parents spoke Spanish, it was difficult for them to help me with my homework, so I became independent more quickly than most, which I believed helped me succeed more as I grew up. In 7th grade, Ada Vista's program continued at Forest Hills Northern Hills Middle School, which combined with 2 other elementary schools. I had been with the same 74 kids my entire educational life up until that point, so middle school was a big change for me. The biggest change I faced when going to middle school was that all of my classes weren't in Spanish anymore. Instead, I only had social studies and language arts in Spanish. The hardest subject for me during middle school was science, because I basically had to relearn everything I had been taught in Spanish and try to translate it to English. Seeing as though my class was the first class to go to the middle school from Ada Vista, the administration soon realized that the transition wasn't as easy as they would have hoped for. Because of this, my perception of school really changed. In elementary school, we had an easy routine and everyone was familiar, and the course material was usually familiar as well. In middle school, however, we were learning words we had never heard of with people we had never met before. It was a challenging experience for me, but overall it helped me prepare for high school and beyond. For the most part, my middle school experience was a good one. But my least favorite teacher and my worst school experience to this day took place there. I remember sitting in my 7th grade science classroom on the second day of school, nervous because my science teacher was passing out a pretest for the semester. When I looked down at the first question, it felt as though my stomach had fallen out of me. I looked at the student next to me, who was an English student as we called them, and she seemed to be filling out the answers with ease. I nudged her and I asked her what a beaker was. She rolled her eyes at me and started to giggle. She never answered my question, but I wanted to do well on the pretest, so I walked up to the desk where my teacher was sitting, reading his emails, and I asked him, "Excuse me, what is a beaker?" He looked at me blankly and rolled his eyes just like the girl did, and giggled a little as well. What he did next was something I will never forget, but I wish I could. He stood up and made everyone stop taking their pretest. I could feel the heat rushing up to my face as it turned what I assumed to be bright red. He spoke very loudly and said, "Allie here. It's Allie, isn't it?" I nodded. "Allie doesn't know what a beaker is, class." Everyone started to laugh. "Can someone tell me what a beaker is?" he said. As I watched, 25 hands went shooting up. I later found out that a beaker is what we call in Spanish un vaso, which doesn't sound anything like a beaker. It was mortifying. I knew I wasn't dumb, but that teacher made me feel less than compared to every other student, and I began to despise science. I refused to let my middle school science teacher hold me back, though. I continued to work hard every day in his class, and I ended up getting an A both semesters. Through this experience, I realized that not even my least favorite teacher could bring me down. I could overcome anything that was put in my way. When I first walked into Forest Hills Northern High School, I was extremely overwhelmed and anxious. I was still in the Spanish immersion program in high school, but instead of having set Spanish classes, we were able to pick them. All throughout high school, I took my social studies classes in Spanish, but nothing else. By then, I was more accustomed to English classes, and I actually began to enjoy them. I consider my biggest accomplishment in high school to be finding my passion. I discovered I loved working with children who have disabilities my sophomore year in high school. I was fortunate enough to go to a school that provided children with special needs the opportunity to be in some general education classes. My gym class my sophomore year had 7 children with special needs in it. I began to talk to them and fell in love instantly with every single one of them. My senior year, I received the amazing opportunity to work alongside of them in their classroom. Through doing this, I realized that being a special education teacher was what I was meant to do. High school challenged me, changed me, and overall made me a better person. I am forever grateful that I went to such an amazing high school. My favorite teacher of all time was my high school psychology teacher, Mrs. Schatz-Flickema. When I think of a great teacher, I think of someone who is relatable, reliable, and honest. Mrs. Schatz was all of those things and more. She genuinely cared about each and every one of her students, and she was such an amazing woman. I think that creating personal relationships with your students is extremely important because it gives students a safe place to come to if they need help. Mrs. Schatz was always someone that I could come talk to about anything, and she really made me feel loved and comfortable in her classroom. I felt so comfortable with her that I decided to travel across Europe with her and a few other students this past June. I will always remember Mrs. Schatz-Flickema, and I am so thankful that she showed me what a fantastic teacher is. My best learning experience was in elementary school when we learned the alphabet. Because I went to a Spanish immersion school, we learned the alphabet in both English and Spanish. My teacher, Senora Sanford, taught us a song in Spanish using the alphabet and animals that started with that specific letter and the sound that the letter made. I can still sing the song to this day, and because I plan on teaching special education, I would love to incorporate this lesson into my classroom someday, but probably with the English alphabet instead of Spanish. Teaching is like gardening because you have to care for and nurture your students just like a gardener cares and nurtures his seeds. You must do this so your students grow into successful citizens of society. Going to a Spanish immersion school completely changed my way of thinking and has opened up a lot of doors for me. I can communicate with more people because of it, and I believe it made me a more diverse and accepting person. When I am a teacher one day, I hope to use my Spanish and knowledge of culture and diversity to make my classroom a warm and inviting place. I know that not only will I be teaching my students, but they will be teaching me things as well. Conrad Hall once said, "You are always a student, never a master. You have to keep moving forward." Though I am not sure what the future has in store for me, I am happy to continue working towards my dream of becoming a special education teacher.